Have you ever wished to be someone who thinks clearly, even when the world tries to confuse you? Someone who doesn't bend to public opinion, censorship, or manipulation? Have you ever dreamed of the day when you will finally stop biting your tongue, stop hiding your questions, stop pretending to agree just to avoid conflict, when deep down, you know something isn't right? Maybe you're tired of playing along with narratives that don't make sense, tired of smiling at what you know is wrong, of maintaining a mask that demands constant silence, when in truth, all you wanted was a space to speak your mind without fear. But let me tell you something that perhaps no one has had the courage to say. As long as you avoid thinking for yourself, someone else will do the thinking for you. As long as you silence your reason, as long as you retreat from truth, you'll remain a puppet, controlled not by chains, but by ideas you never questioned. And this is not cowardice. This is the condition of most people. The difference is that some comply more elegantly than others. Voltaire once wrote that to hold a pen is to be at war. And that's exactly where the power lies. It's not about shouting louder. It's not about becoming cynical, arrogant, or dismissive. It's about awakening. It's about using wit as a weapon and reason as a shield against the slow poison of ignorance. Because true freedom is not the absence of conflict, but the full awareness of your capacity to question, even when everyone else stays silent. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. This video is for you who are tired of being intellectually disarmed. It's for you who feel that something is wrong, but never found the words or the courage to say it out loud. I want to show you that it doesn't have to be this way, but for that, you'll need to sharpen your mind, challenge your beliefs, and perhaps, just perhaps, use humor to expose what fear tried to keep hidden. Let's begin. You believe that what oppresses you comes from outside, from the media that manipulates, from institutions that lie, from the voices that scream but say nothing. You think the problem is in the misinformation, in the control, in the absurdities you hear daily. But here comes the hard truth. None of that truly imprisons you, unless your mind is already unarmed. What weakens you is not the noise of the world, but your silence before it. It's the fear of questioning, the fear of thinking for yourself. It is the emptiness that you fill with borrowed opinions, with blind allegiance, with that desperate need to belong. Voltaire reminds us that tyranny does not begin with force. It begins when thought dies. And that's why some people, even under pressure, remain lucid and untouchable, while others crumble at the first sign of contradiction. It's not about what's being said, it's about where it hits you. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. You still suffer intellectually because deep down, you want the world to make sense without effort. You still hope that truth will come pre-packaged, delivered by authority figures or social trends, as if that would save you from the responsibility of thinking. But certainty is an illusion, and while you cling to it, you live in a prison built by your own need for comfort, trying to be agreeable, trying to not offend, trying to survive by playing safe. Do you want to stop being mentally enslaved? Then stop fearing the discomfort of doubt. What you need is not more reassurance, but more reason. As long as you believe that others must stop being ignorant for you to be free, you'll remain their intellectual prisoner. Your freedom begins the moment you realize that lies only gain power when truth is silenced. And that is exactly where the true battlefield lies. In your own capacity to reason, to satirize, to speak, especially when silence is the rule. Because what you do not think through, thinks for you. And that's what we'll explore in the next part. Get ready to go one level deeper, because that's where true freedom begins. If this content resonated with you, hit the subscribe button and join this movement. Your mind is your last frontier. Let's defend it. The biggest lie you've been told is that you are free to think. Wake up, because you're not. At least, not as long as you continue absorbing ideas without questioning them, repeating phrases you never examined, nodding in agreement with things you never really understood. Voltaire warned us, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And what is happening to you now is exactly that. You are not thinking, you are reacting. And every time you react without reflection, someone else has already done the thinking for you. That fear you feel before speaking your mind, the anxiety when your opinion doesn't match the crowd, the discomfort in questioning the official narrative, none of that is random. They are symptoms of a mind that has been gradually trained to obey, not to reason. And this mental submission doesn't begin in chains. It begins in silence. It begins when you censor your own thoughts before anyone else does. When you ridicule those who dare to challenge, not because they're wrong, but because they make you uncomfortable. Voltaire didn't see satire as a game. He saw it as a blade, sharp enough to cut through illusion. And your mind is dulling because you've traded that blade for politeness. You wonder why certain lies keep spreading while truth seems weak. It's because truth is silent when minds are passive, and minds become passive when people fear being offensive more than being ignorant. You've been taught that respect means avoiding confrontation, that peace means avoiding conflict. But what you've really learned is how to betray your own reasoning to stay comfortable, and that comfort is killing you slowly. You see it in the patterns of blind obedience that repeat, in the way satire has been replaced by slogans, in the way fear now wears the mask of virtue. This is not coincidence. It is your freedom of thought under siege. And yet, you keep defending the very forces that silence you. Do you want to become someone who cannot be manipulated? Then stop outsourcing your judgment, because as long as you don't think freely, someone else will think for you. And the more you protect yourself from the discomfort of reason, the more exposed you become to the tyranny of unreason. But there is a way out, and it's not through hiding your voice but sharpening it, because becoming unshakable is not an act of isolation, but of illumination. That's what we'll explore next. What does it really mean to be someone who thinks fearlessly? And why does real strength come not from shouting louder, but from daring to question the silence? Most people believe that the only way to avoid being attacked is by staying silent. They build intellectual walls, wear the mask of conformity, develop mental armor, and pretend that they agree with everything. They say, "That's just the way it is. It's not worth arguing. Better not get involved." But inside, they keep suffocating. Because the problem was never about thinking too much. The problem is not thinking at all, and not knowing why you believe what you believe. And this only happens to those who have never dared to think for themselves. Voltaire once said, "To learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize." And yet, you hide behind politeness, behind neutrality, behind the illusion of being reasonable, when in truth, your own voice is screaming to be heard. Becoming intellectually free has nothing to do with arrogance or rebellion for its own sake. It has nothing to do with arguing louder or proving others wrong. It has everything to do with clarity, with integrating reason, doubt, and humor as tools to expose the absurd. You don't become untouchable by hiding behind passive silence. You become untouchable when you realize that no ideology, no opinion, no ridicule can harm what you've already examined, questioned, and accepted within your own mind. When you question your assumptions, when you strip away the dogmas that others gave you, you stop reacting defensively. You start choosing where to stand and why. You are no longer an intellectual puppet, and that is true freedom. Voltaire used satire not as mockery, but as a scalpel, to dissect the lies dressed as virtue, to expose the rot beneath authority, and to remind us that laughter is often the most dangerous form of resistance. Freedom of thought is not a luxury. It is the very foundation of personal strength. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to think without fear. You don't need to become a more agreeable person. You just need to become a thinking person. And here lies the secret no one teaches you. The more you avoid conflict of ideas, the more you weaken your own capacity to reason. The more you seek safety in silence, the more exposed you become to manipulation. But when you face discomfort, when you accept your contradictions, when you laugh at the absurd instead of fearing it, nothing outside can mentally enslave you again. However, this path demands courage. Courage to question, courage to offend where truth demands it, courage to think in public, even when it costs you approval, because it is precisely in doubt, in ridicule, in the sharpening of thought, that the seed of true strength is buried. And that is what we'll explore next, how reason, satire, and fearless speech can turn ignorance into awareness and oppression into fuel for awakening. Let's dive deeper, and this time with our minds open and unafraid. You learn to fear doubt. Since you were little, you were taught that questioning is disrespectful, that thinking differently is dangerous, that mocking authority is a sign of arrogance, and so you began to obey, to adapt, to conform. But the more you run from independent thought, the more ignorance gains ground. And the worst part, it doesn't announce itself with force. It disguises itself as certainty, blind obedience, moral superiority, mental traps that slowly destroy your capacity to reason. Suppressed thought does not disappear. It just builds pressure in silence, until one day, without warning, it erupts as confusion, disillusionment, or bitter resentment. Voltaire saw this clearly. He believed that the pain of thinking was far better than the comfort of submission. He understood that satire, sharp, uncomfortable, and honest, is not just a tool to laugh with, but a weapon to break illusions. He warned us, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. But you don't question. You silence your doubt. You keep yourself distracted, entertained, emotionally sedated. You do everything to avoid confronting what truly matters. And what is this discomfort trying to show you? The truth is, you suffer not because people lie to you, but because you've stopped demanding the truth. There is still a part of you that wants to awaken, and another part clinging to the comfort of not knowing. There's a voice within you begging for clarity, but your ego, addicted to validation, tries to shut it down. And it's in this collision that inner tyranny is born, because thinking hurts. It forces you to burn your old beliefs. It demands that you laugh at the lies you once called truth. It requires you to destroy what once protected you, ignorance disguised as identity. But it is precisely in that mental demolition that something real can finally emerge. Because when your worldview collapses, when collective dogmas no longer satisfy, when satire pierces your sacred cows, what remains is not emptiness, it's freedom. At that very point, thinking becomes sacred, because it brings you face to face with the only thing that was ever yours, your reason. Voltaire understood this. He knew that the path to true liberty is paved not with agreement, but with resistance, not with silence, but with fearless thought. The problem is, most people turn back before the breakthrough. They ridicule those who question. They defend their cages. They return to the comfort of ready-made ideas, but not you. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to cross the line. And in the next part, we'll explore what that journey looks like, how freedom of thought, no matter how painful or isolating it may seem, is the only real antidote to tyranny. Few people have the courage to think freely, and even fewer have the courage to live according to that thought. Because this path doesn't offer comfort, doesn't promise safety, and certainly doesn't flatter your ego. It dismantles it. Voltaire understood this well. Freedom of thought is not a decorative idea. It is a force of destruction, of illusions, dogmas, and identities built only to conform. To truly reason, you must first unlearn. And nothing hurts more than realizing that most of what you believed, defended, and even admired was never truly yours. You are not the opinions you inherited. You are not the slogans you repeated to fit in. You are not the persona you built to be accepted, applauded, or left alone. All of that was survival. Mental survival in a culture that punishes independent thought. But surviving intellectually is not living freely. And Voltaire's message is a wake-up call beyond obedience. It's when your reason begins to stir what was repressed. It's when your satire starts to expose what was never questioned. It's when your voice finally emerges, not to echo others, but to challenge them. He warned, to hold a pen is to be at war, because to think clearly, you must be willing to tear off the mask of social convenience. You must look at the world not through borrowed eyes, but with your own sharpened gaze. And that hurts, because what you'll find is not just ignorance around you, but within you. But that's where the power lies. The moment you begin to dissect your assumptions, you stop being fragile. You've gone through the fire of ridicule, censorship, misunderstanding, and survived. You've faced your need for approval, your fear of dissent, and said, I see you. You no longer decide how I speak. This is the armor Voltaire offered. Not silence, but clarity. Not passivity, but irony. Not obedience, but reason. When you reach this internal freedom, you no longer need to win every debate. You no longer need to be admired by the crowd. You no longer need to pretend, because now you know who you are, and no system, no ideology, no mass opinion can take that away from you. Real intellectual strength is not arrogance, it is depth. It is the ability to stand in the storm of confusion and manipulation and still remain rooted in what you've examined, questioned, and chosen to believe. You may feel pressure, but it doesn't bend you. You may be challenged, but it doesn't silence you, because you are no longer a mirror of the world's noise. You are its contrast. And yes, there is a cost to this clarity: solitude. Not because you are alone, but because few are willing to question what keeps them comfortably asleep. Most remain on the surface, in cliches, in fear, in borrowed certainty. And when you begin to break free, you drift away. But this distance is not arrogance. It is awakening. You don't walk away out of superiority. You walk away because you no longer belong to the places where silence is mistaken for peace. And that brings us to the final truth. It is not strength that protects your mind. It is consciousness. It is reason. It is laughter in the face of the absurd. This is what we'll explore in the final part: how consciousness, sharpened by thought and lit by satire, becomes the only shield no tyrant can penetrate. Let's finish this crossing together. You've come too far to stop now. Now that you've made it this far, there's something that must be said without filters. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will protect you from intellectual manipulation if you remain unconscious of what is shaping your thoughts from within. The propaganda will keep seducing you. The public opinion will keep silencing you. The absurd will keep sounding reasonable until you awaken. And awakening is not a flash of light. It's a disciplined revolt. It's the daily act of questioning what you hear, of refusing to think by default. It's the choice to take ownership of your own reasoning, without blaming the system, your upbringing, or how things are. Voltaire once said, "Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers." And yet, you've spent your life avoiding the questions that matter: the fear of being ridiculed, the guilt of standing out, the discomfort of being the only one laughing at the emperor's nakedness. But what did you do with that fear? You adapted, you stayed quiet, you polished your opinions until they were acceptable. You tried to be agreeable, you tried to be invisible. And that's what brought you here. Intellectually fatigued, numb, tired of playing a role that requires silence as the price of belonging. But now you know, true mental freedom doesn't come from resistance. It comes from lucidity. It's not about building thicker walls. It's about opening your eyes and sharpening your tongue. Because once you understand your biases, your patterns of thought, your unexamined assumptions, the lies of the world lose their grip on you. You still hear them, but you don't absorb them. You still see the absurdity, but you don't become part of it. And that changes everything. What protects you is not insulation from the world. It's immersion in it, with a thinking mind. Those who stay on the surface get tossed by every wave. Those who dive find stillness and truth where others only see confusion. And that's where you're going. Because once you begin to live from a place of reason, presence, and conscious satire, the world may try to shame you, to pressure you, to censor you, but it will no longer find where to control you. If this message stirred something in you, if a part of your mind woke up, write in the comments, "I choose to think freely." Let's begin a movement of people who no longer want to survive through silence, but to live through reason and fearless speech. And remember, the next video is not just content. It's continuation, it's resistance, because true transformation doesn't come when you understand the first truth. It comes when you insist on seeking the second and the third and every uncomfortable one after that. See you there.